When I hit year 25 in this Roller Coaster Tycoon game save file, I realized that I was probably going to keep going and that this was going to get more and more elaborate. This is a game save file that I started when I was working on a video, and I just wanted to test some techniques, some roller coaster designs, and see where it goes. I took these screenshots to share with my friends in a gaming forum, and I just wanted to show where I was at year 24. I was actually traveling internationally. My cell phone data was at a premium, so I didn't record any game footage, but I do have these screenshots. And in case you're wondering, 1 year in Roller Coaster Tycoon time without speeding up is like an hour real time. However, I do mostly speed up, so I usually play, 1.5 hours is 1 year of game time. By year 50, I pretty much built most of the things I wanted in the park. It was very stable. There was a lot of clout. My park had hit all of the highest metrics, enough staff to keep it running, and the attractions that were custom built were performing very strongly. However, the sprawl of the park and the fact that it wasn't really planned, it was just kind of built as I went along, meant that some of the paths were a little windy. And frankly, I started to suspect that I couldn't get over 300,000 guests because my paths were so confusing for guests. The entire park was incredibly gray. To propel my park past that 3,000 guest mark, I decided that the best solution was to actually take up all of the path in the entire park and redo it with better coloring, better strategy, and better queue lines. Pulling up all the paths throughout the park is a little bit daunting of a task, so I started by trying to clear out as many guests as possible by closing down all of the attractions. I thought that this might inspire them to leave out of lack of activity and maybe drain the further parts of the park. Let me tear up those portions first, and also just watch the terror and the scrambling. This is a really great simulation game for the mere fact that it is a simulation and that the little characters have an amount of intelligence that dictates where they go. And so it's interesting to watch the reactions to things. So that's part of the reason why I have so many years on the same file, because I just like to watch a lot of the time what's going on throughout the park. At this point in the park, I had quite a bit of original ride designs with great names like Chairlift for Algernon, Chariot Ride, Custom Coaster, Equestria Horror. Fun names like that. A lot of them continue on and you'll see them later in this video, like Joseph Gordon-Levitt Looper or Jared Leto on Mars. But some of the classics like Lassie Doggo did not quite make it. The act of deleting the path is fun because it frees up that space that's currently going to that terrible, ugly concrete path, and we could put down something that makes a lot more sense and that is hopefully going to be a lot better for the guests in the park. Plus, they scramble around. That's always fun to see. And then if you delete the path from an elevated space while guests are on it, they fall into the nothingness of the park. I don't actually want anyone to get trapped in the park. That wouldn't be very good. I don't want anyone walking around the green saying, I'm lost and I can't find the exit. So when I do that, I try to put a small path where they'll be wandering around that they will attract to, and then from that path build a way where they can lead out into the rest of the park. My main issues here with the way that the path was currently built is that A, it's all one color, B, it's so many different levels. It's really hard to trace the wayfinding of the park. It's not natural. It would be very confusing for an actual person to navigate with all the ups and downs. And as an overlooker, it's just hard to follow where everyone's going and where there may be trash hang-ups. So it's really hard to monitor. Rest in peace, this very cool path that went right through the loop of this roller coaster. That was a great addition and something that is lost to time. A full year later in game time, I pulled up all of the pathway, and the only people remaining in the park are the staff members. There are 0 guests, the park is closed, all of the rides are closed, and at this point I don't really care if the staff members have anywhere to walk. I've set all of the handymen to mind the grass, so that makes everything look very nice and tidy. And it's really surreal to see the park with all of the rides completely empty with not even a way to get around. I'm going to evaluate the rides, and those that aren't up to snuff are going to be deleted. One of the primary objectives of emptying the park and clearing the paths was trying to build better infrastructure to have as many guests in the park as possible. And I read on the Reddit that you could fit a lot of the guests in the queue lines. So it occurred to me that I should probably start building this park by building very large queue lines for the guests with amenities so that they don't get bored while they're in line, like the TVs in the queue lines to distract them, and of course entertainers to keep their happiness level up while they're in those queue lines. But long queue lines can take a lot of guests out of circulation, so there's more space in the park for them to wander around. Some of the rides had great designs, but were the smallest amount inconvenient in their placement in the park. A lot of the rides were designed as sort of infill around the other attractions that were near them. So what I did in some of these cases was save the ride design, then demolish the ride, and then put the ride back down. This serves 2 purposes. It'll be a new ride for guests when they come into the park. They're like, oh wow, this is exciting. And then they'll spend more money to get on that same ride. But it also gives me a chance to revamp the ride and save it for other games in the future. Now let's jump about 50 years to the future. This is after I laid down the pathway, and I've worked on the pathway, reworked parts, put parts down, put parts back up, and messed everything around. The way that I placed the path is with color theming, so that there are different sections of the park that are set off by the color of path. That way, if I'm looking at a guest window or a staff member window, I can immediately tell which part of the park they're in by the path color that they're on. This was just a little bit of shorthand. I also used different queue lines for different parts or different rides within the parts, so I could tell the difference between a queue line that's on top of another queue line. On the note of queue lines, I built out these gigantic queue lines, and in order to get that number of guests way up, I dropped the price of all of my rides to free and sent out hecka marketing campaigns to bring those guests in, and it totally worked. I hit above 7,000 guests in the same size park with better pathing. I thought that this is a huge success. I love my rides. There are less rides, and they are better distributed throughout the park than they were before. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of rides for a very long time without revamping them. I have to admit that working on this video lit a renewed interest in this save file, so I've been spending a lot of time on it in the last couple of days. This is definitely what I do when I get on the subway. I have, 30 minutes to and from work on the subway every day, and if you play this game, this save file, you rack up hours really quickly, and those hours translate to years. And I really enjoy the way that I built these rides. I feel like I learned a lot, and the mazes are so much fun. The one thing that I'll probably focus on if I keep playing this save file would be how I distribute the staff members. I have a lot of really old rides. The oldest ride in my park is Raging Death, which was built the first year of the park, Raging Death, and it is like a child roller coaster. It's a kiddie coaster, and it's the #1 guest favorite. It's their favorite ride in my entire park, and I haven't moved it and I haven't touched it in years. The only thing that I change, and I tinker with this consistently, is how many trains and the spacing of the trains. I am hyper focused on getting the most efficient guest efficiency on these rides. So that's guests onto the ride, guests out of the ride quickly so that the queue line keeps moving, and in a way that makes sure that when somebody gets off the ride, if they want to immediately get back on the ride, that hopefully it's spaced so that they will be able to do that, because the next car will be leaving as they are approaching the entrance of the queue line, and the Keyline Distribution should be set up in such a way that it's moving and has moved by the point that guest has gotten to the end of the line. And these queue lines are really dramatic. I also have a lot of do not enter signs. This portion of the park, the brown path portion, is rigorously decorated with do not enter signs. It's my favorite portion of the park because the controls are so strict of where guests can go. If I don't do this, it just gets entirely too crowded. It still is crowded in this portion of the park, but it gets way out of hand without these do not enter signs. And this just introduces a level of order that's necessary when you have 7,000 guests in your park and it's a small park. If I were to do this specific park again, or just generally a large project, I would probably want to start by trying to put a transportation system underground, like perhaps an underground train system, so that way it's out of the way and it gets people around the park. Like my chairlift in this park is incredible. I actually have 2 chairlifts. One was a recent addition in the last 5 game years, and the other is a long-standing chairlift that is one of the most popular attractions in the park. It has one of the largest queue lines, and it makes a consistent amount of money for the park. And if I could have put that underground, I think that would have saved space, and it would be a great way to make easy money because guests love the gentle rides. But yeah, so that and the staff management are the things that I'm really working on in my greater Roller Coaster Tycoon game. But I'm excited to take what I learned from this to other Roller Coaster Tycoon save files, and I'm just gonna be honest, I'm probably gonna keep playing the save file because it's a lot of fun and it's what I do.